Hey everyone, this is Louis7 and I'm starting a new series in the Lord of the Rings Online, and this series will go over what I think the worst parts of the game are. And before I get into this one, which will be on class trait points actually, I do want to mention a few things. And these videos are intended to provide constructive feedback about the game rather than just criticize LOTRO over and over again. So that's not the goal. And the plan for each video is to just go over what I think the problem is and explain why I dislike whatever I'm going over, and maybe end with some ways to fix it or alternatives. That part really depends on what I'm going over. But hopefully these videos will give constructive feedback to any devs that may and hopefully would watch it. And maybe I can find out some more of what the community thinks on whatever I'm going over as well. So to start off with this one, I do like the current class trait and point system in general. There are some minor flaws, but one particular major flaw with the trait points. Some of the minor flaws would include balancing, and I just also think when some abilities are gotten in specs and how some of them are organized and laid out could be changed. And one thing I do think is all classes could get a skill as early as the second row that emphasizes that gameplay and fantasy of that spec. So for example, I'm on my champion now. I think it's a good example. Right away in the red line in the first row, they actually get a single target skill with 3 attacks, and that kind of defines the spec, a strong single target skill, and it has multiple attacks. The yellow line also gets a AoE skill with 2 attacks, and if you're dual wielding, I believe it does 3. So that kind of defines the yellow spec as a strong AoE, and that's a fervor consumer as well as brutal strikes from the red line. In addition to those two, the the blue line also gets an AoE range skill that reduces the damage of enemies. Even though blue line champion isn't considered viable right now, that skill still defines what a blue line champion would do by giving a debuff, AoE, and a ranged attack that is a horn skill. So I think the champion is a good example of what that could look like, and I think this should be universal for all the classes and specs. So that would allow no classes or specs to feel left out from another class or spec getting new strong skills earlier and that one just not. And some specs don't get any rotationally active skills at all even. I just think for at least early parts it would be nice if there is a universal row where all specs got a good rotational skill. So like champion, if they wanted to do it universally like the second row, they could move brutal strikes to the second row even though you'd get that a little bit later. And they could always maybe change the early red line experience and what you get right away to fix that in particular. And perhaps another alternative to that is to have all the active skills gained through the trait bonuses actually on the left. So for example, red line could get brutal strikes right here, where precise strikes is right now, and yellow line would get raging blade there, and then the blue line would get the horn skill right there also. But I think the important thing is that each spec could get a rotational skill that kind of defines what the spec does in an early row, so it leads on early what the class will be like as well. So balancing, I think, is something that could just really be improved by tweaks and some traits throughout the spec, and maybe changing like how far you get some in the lines. So some classes like the hunter here largely benefit from specializing into one tree but using some of those points from another tree, and only get really good or maybe even viable if they spend points in the other tree. So I think your main focus should be on your main tree. And the hunter here, as an example, I am the blue line right now, and I could benefit greatly if I had more points and went into the red tree, but right now I just don't have enough points and I'm not nearly as viable without some of the traits in the red line, even though I'm a blue line hunter, and I could even still use more traits in the blue line that would be beneficial to me. So I think the blue line hunter really showcases that, how some certain specs can really benefit from other specs, and maybe the traits in the other spec that really benefit a certain other spec could be put further down the line, or there could actually be more viable stuff within the blue line that makes you not even want to go to the red line. And with a class like Hunter doing similar things with range bow damage, they both have damage over time and they both want focus and to consume focus. Many of the things they want to use will be the same, but stuff like induction, I think there's one right here, that is actually more exclusive to the red line, and instant cast focus consumers would be more exclusive to the blue line. So I think there could be just changes overall around there, and I do need to not forget that I still would like hybrid builds to be viable. So if I went back on my champion and wanted to be like a hybrid red and yellow line, not really the best at single target, not the best at AoE, but kind of in between on both, so I can do either and be versatile. So all that stuff with changing when you get traits and stuff like that sounds good in theory to me, but I'd have to actually see how it works out, because if you move some key traits down, that could actually make that spec very unfun and less viable when you do that spec. So you still want to keep in mind that you want that spec to be fun and viable. So like if you moved a bunch of the good stuff for blue line and the red line down to the bottom, you would still want the red line hunter to be fun if you just spec'd red line to begin with. So another alternative, I think, is you could gate any other lines until you spend a certain amount of points in your main spec. So I have only 50 points right now, which is actually the problem I will get to later. But I think if they made it like you can only spend one of your points, or it'd actually be two, in another line, if you spend 5 points already in your main line, that could maybe help. At this point, I would only be able to spend 5 points or I'd actually be able to spend 10 points in the red line like that. Maybe even 10 points spent in your main spec. You'd really have to do testing and see how that works, but that could deter you from wanting to go into the other line too much to get some key stuff when you'd rather get stuff in your main line. And another way they could make that a viable option is making the stuff in your main line actually viable and good and worth choosing to begin with. And then a third and final alternative that I'm thinking of is you could actually have two different types of points. One type of point for your main spec that can only be spent there, and maybe every, I don't know, maybe you get like 1/10 of those, 1/20th of those to spend in any other spec of your choice. So like I'd have 50 points for blue line right now and maybe 5 points to spend in the red line, and they'd only take 1 point each, so it's simple. They could do something like that, or I could spend them in the yellow line. There's just nothing too useful that I'd want in that in particular right now, although the damage over time would be nice actually. Alright, so that actually took a bit longer than I thought it would be, and I guess there were more issues with that than I thought too. But those were the two main minor problems that I had in mind with the actual traits and the trait system. So now for the trait points, which is somewhat related to the classes greatly benefiting from having more useful traits as you get more points than other classes and specs. So this issue is on the points, acquiring them, how many there are, and kind of related to Valor. So the first thing is I just don't really like that there's only one way to get each trait point. And there will be 88 trait points in Mordor. I believe there are 83 right now at the maximum. And you have to quest in some really, really boring to me areas, do some deeds, do boring to me class quests again. And there are actually a bunch of options. So I'm looking at the list right now from the LOTRO wiki, and you get only 50 of those from leveling, so 33 you have to get by other means. I actually like the class deed meta deeds because those make you use your class and make you use some skills. They're kind of a fun alternative way because you'll get them anyway by leveling, but I do think maybe some of those could be changed. For example, Lore Master needs to use Gust of Wind for one, which is a not too useful skill to say the least. So some of those might be able to be changed, or some of the skills they use should actually be balanced to where they're useful and not just useless and sitting there to where you don't even want to use them. The legendary books, reading books like that you have to buy from a vendor or do stuff for, it can be okay, and those ones you have to get like a bunch of items in certain zones or pages to books, I believe. So those ones are kind of okay. And then getting ones from epic battles, if epic battles were actually fun and common, that could be good. But again, I don't find those fun, and a lot of people don't really run them because a lot of people don't like them, so I don't really like that there are trait points locked in those. I also don't really like that there are a lot locked in epic quests, like I mentioned earlier, for especially quests that I do not like, and there are even more for just quest chains in some areas like West Rohan and Central Gondor. And then there are some for deeds, which one of those deeds happens to be Quest of Old Anorian, which, again, I don't like. And then another is from the Deeds of Old Anorian, so even more deeds. So I think there are actually a few ways to fix this, and before I get to that, I want to mention again Valor. This is a whole separate issue, but I think the Blessing of the Valor, Gift of the Valor, should give you a minimum trait point amount that you could expect by that level. So the 1 to 95 ones should get you pretty much all of them, maybe all but the Central Gondor. This should get you these with the current system, and the ones I would find ideal that I will go over in a little bit. The new Araya, I think that's what it's called, of the Valor, would get you everything pre-mortar, which is all 83 points for level 105. And I know they are at least able to automatically complete the deeds for you to get these and all that stuff, because you can do that in the Isengard Tavern on Bulwark. So there might be some technical limitations with doing that specifically with the Valor if they don't want you to have the deeds complete and get all the LOTRO points from completing the deeds, but I think they could make a workaround and get it. And especially with the new system I have in mind, which is actually to set a cap on the points. So they could keep all the current points and ways to get them as they are, so people who like questing and getting them through that, they can still do that and it'll be all good for them. But if they set a cap, maybe so people don't have to lose any, set a cap at like 90 in Mordor, since you'd have 88 at the level 115 cap if you had all the points. And just offer a bunch of new ways to get them. For example, you could get them through using even more skills and doing more class deed meta deeds. As kind of bad and pay to win as this sounds, I think you could be able to buy them from the store, but that'd have to be limited by level, just so a bunch of level 7s don't buy a bunch and become OP. So that would have to be more of a limited thing based on level and stuff like that. I think maybe like you can get some through doing epic battles, getting promotion points. You could get some through doing deeds and instances, like basically complete 100 featured instance and you get a point, and you can then do 200 or 300 and get more points, and all these will count to that cap. They could add more to quests in Mordor even, again for people who like questing. They could add some to the new system, can't think of the name of it right now, but that new system with the factions and reputations and which one you choose. And that way they could also offer the Valor actually having those and giving you an amount without having to worry about automatically completing these. They can just give you a set amount, so you still have other ways to get the rest of yours if they don't just go ahead and give you all of them. So another alternative to that, I think, would be just getting rid of all the trait points from non-leveling, and maybe even just non-leveling versions, and you get all your trait points from leveling. Maybe like at level 50 you get 2 every big level amount, maybe even 10, 20, 30 all the way through 100. And then 105, 110, 115, something like that, just to get some extra along the way at big levels. Or end of expansions, maybe you get 2 like level 50, 60, 65, so on. Just to add more of an accomplishment to finishing that area, expansion, region, or whatever. I think I would like the first way better if, as a player, and if I were designing it, because that would offer more ways for more types of players and still allow people who do like doing the quest to get trait points and deeds to be able to do that, and also for people who don't like doing that and would like alternate ways like doing instances, using more of their skills, or just playing more to be able to get them. Now this could also solve the problem of some classes and specs only being strong, like again Blue Line Hunter back there, if They only have enough trait points to get all the traits that will actually make them good enough to be worth considering running with. So I think that's about it for this video. I just really think the trait points part needs some major changing. The other ones aren't too big of a deal. I mean, they were just kind of minor things I thought of and maybe rambled a bit long about, but I really think the trait points could use changing because I don't like having to do all that stuff to go back and get them just to be viable. Like on my lore master right here, I could use a lot of stuff in the blue line as a red line lore master and become a lot stronger solo. And I'm just not nearly as strong until I do that, or maybe even I could get into the yellow line more and be able to be more useful to a fellowship and offering some good damage, or decent damage at least, and some decent debuffs at least. And like, again with my hunter, my blue line hunter could have all the traits to be a lot more fun. I think I would play my hunter more if she had all those traits and was actually more fun like that. And even the way it is, because I really didn't like questing in some of those areas, I just don't have that many trait points even on my characters with the most, like my warden and runekeeper. They still need a bunch, and they would probably also be stronger with those. So again, that's just like the main point of this video is on the class trait points, and I just really think those need changing as LOTRO goes on. Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and be sure to let me know what you think. If you enjoy it as it is, or if it could use changing and maybe enjoy one of the alternatives I thought of. And also on this series as a whole, if you could let me know any feedback on, I know this is just the first episode, but how this episode went, what you think of it, and if you'd like to see more. Again, this is not supposed to be just a negative series criticizing LOTRO. It's supposed to be constructive, offer feedback, and alternatives and options to change some stuff for hopefully the better. And I've thought about a similar series that would be the best of LOTRO. That's just kind of floating around at this point. I'm not really sure, but if you're interested in that, let me know, please. And I may start working on it and thinking about it more at least. So that will be it, and I hope you all enjoyed this, and thanks for watching.